Submit yourselves then to God, resist the devil, and he will flee from you. Come near to God, and he will come near to you. Wash your hands, you sinners, and purify your hearts, you double-minded. Grieve, mourn, and wail. Change your laughter to mourning, your joy to gloom. In verse 10, humble yourself before the Lord, and then he will lift you up. So James is saying humility, folks. Humility is the solution to what ails us. So now, I ask, what's the answer? The answer is and always has been humility. So I ask, what is humility? You know, we create constructs of what we think humility is. What we'd like to look at this morning is the biblical concept of what humility is. And I'd like to say a few things of what humility is not. Humility is not a personality type. We tend to think that because somebody's quiet, that they're humble. Maybe. We tend to think that because somebody's loud, they're not humble. Maybe. Jesus was humble and he went on a few rants with some folks. So it's not primarily a personality type. Humility is also not being necessarily a pushover or a doormat. We think if we get pushed up and down the block, we're being humble. If you notice with Jesus, when he interacted with the world, he didn't get pushed around. Paul did not get pushed around. But they were seen as humble in the eyes of the Lord. Correct? So how do we become humble? James tells us in the verse that I just read, part of it is tied up in verse 7 where he says, submit yourself to the Lord. So the only way we can come to him is in humble submission. So in the Greek word that James uses here in verse 7, when he says submit then to God, is huputasso. Huputasso. I think that's how you pronounce it. And the word means to obey. So when James is saying in verse 7, submit yourself then to God, he's saying obey God. That this is how part of these things that are going on would get fixed. Obedience is... Where did I go? Oh, there it is. Humiliation. Okay. It's humble submission. So what's... okay, I set myself against. So then what God says here is, he uses a very strong word when he says he opposes the proud. When he's talking about humility, he says, I oppose the proud and I give grace to the humble. Now the Greek word there for oppose is a very strong word. So when James is saying he opposes the proud, the context of that is, the word is he sets himself up against. So when he's saying that God opposes the proud, he's just not saying that God disagrees with the proud. He is saying that he sets himself against it. And the word is often used in military terms, and in this context it should be properly understood that God is squaring off against pride. Follow that? He is squaring off against pride. He is opposed to it in principle and practice. So what he's saying is anything that does not come from God, he is hostile to. You follow? That he is hostile to. So God rages against the proud, he gives grace to the humble. As I said, humility is not a personality type. That word means, for humble, that James uses here, to submit ourselves to God. That's how we become, the word for humble means a submission to God. And then in Greek words, I said, hupat asked eso, to place or rank under. And this all will start fitting in quite nicely. So what is humility? The word for humility that Paul uses, that James uses here, the Greek word means low-lying, hence lowly in spirit. And it says humility is achieved by being fully dependent on the Lord. So what he's saying when these strifes and things happen is because people aren't dependent on the Lord. And that's what's going on in Corinth, is people are looking elsewhere than the Lord himself. And it goes a little bit farther. It says, dismissing the Lord and relying upon yourself is pride. Now, the word further for humble means exalting the Lord in all you do and accepting him as your all in all. So what it's saying is the humble person in this prescription is the person who can look to the Lord and only the Lord. That the humble man looks to the Lord, the proud man looks to himself or the world. So what we see, in a conference, some look at the world, we look at scientists, but he's opposed to that. He's set up against it. He rages against it. He's not good with it. He doesn't even tolerate it. He wants to cast it out. See, humility is about submission to the Lord. It's not about walking quietly. It's not about dressing modestly. It's about being and having your heart turned toward the Lord in willful submission to his ways and his word. Humility is nothing more than being dependent on God. I have my handy-dandy Alexander Mack book. And these were his, he didn't write much, but this is one of the things he wrote. And he wrote about, kind of, I guess you'd say, humility and what the child of God looks like, or how they should be functioning. And he writes, therefore, a faithful child of God looks only to his heavenly Father and believes and follows him in this revealed world, because he is certain of and believes that God and his spoken words are completely one. Therefore, learn well the true scriptural distinction of all things, so that you do not become confused, as unfortunately, many souls of this day. Such people become so confused, they become confused because they're not following God, that they don't even know what to think or believe anymore. They have to make a faith for themselves which is not taught by Scripture. They think that they have achieved more than the apostles. Moreover, they no longer take counsel from the writings of the apostles. So, back to the how of reconciliation. Mack understood that the humility is looking and turning to God. So now back to reconciliation. Remember, the humble person, as defined by the Bible, what James is explaining, is the person who will look to God. Thus, to reconcile requires humility. You follow me? Reconciliation requires humility, and that humility is the willing to look to him. It's leaving my opinion at the door. It's leaving Dr. Phil's tape at the door and bowing down before him and saying, Father, what is your take? And willing to sit there and see if we're off, to say, I receive the correction your word gives me. That's humility. Right there. It's not standing up and being quiet. Thus, to reconcile, everyone must become humble. Now, I'm back to my charts. I'll run through these quick. I'm going to give you a picture diagram of reconciliation. Quote number 1. Okay. Oh, next one. Yeah, there we go. Okay. Here's what reconciliation can look like and how it can work. If the humble person, we have to look up at the cross. If both people aren't looking at the cross, we might have some problems. So here we have the example of, let's say these two people are starting out here. The world tells us that they come together, they're becoming reconciled. Remember I talked about that? Well, in the eyes of the world, they may be. But they haven't done anything with the estrangement from God. See, they're still as far from God, and according to the Word, you need to be reconciled with Him. Now, what will happen sometimes, and what I fear has been happening within the Church of the Brethren is, you got part of the Church of the Brethren looking to God and His Word, and you have another part looking to the world and their self. Now, both can sincerely want to be getting along together, right? But how do you think God's going to process that? He says He hates looking at this, right? So actually, though we can be trying to get together in this scenario, we can actually be moving farther and farther apart. You be civil to each other here. You might have pleasantries when you walk down the hall. You might even take each other out to dinner. But from God's perspective, now this is the humble person, willing to look to God. This would be the proud person looking away from God. Okay? Next. Now, hold on one second. Now this would be, I would say, what church do you think this would reflect in the Bible? One group going toward God and one group going another. That would have been Corinth, right? Paul says that some are chasing after these different people, you're wise in the world. That would be the dynamic. That's why they're all monkey monkey. Okay, go to the number 2. Well, the second slide.
What's it called?
World Club. It's got club in it. Club reconciliation. It's what?
It's really there. It's so bright.
Well, I see it. That's not the right slide thing. She have another picture.
They all look the same.
Well, they're different. Just put up another one. I'll get there. This is probably used in the world's way rather than God's way. That's just the Bible. There should have been 5 or 4 or 5.
Yeah, I have. I think 5 of them, but they all. Once we get little green people in there,
Okay. Oh, I know it's probably wrong. Okay. But anyhow, we'll work with it. The next example.
that one?
No, next one. Never done that one. We're supposed to say that. No, that's not it. Go one more. Try another one. They're all the
And
same.
the last out.
What?
And the last one is the thunder.
Yeah, that's fine. Well, okay. Well, we blew it. Okay, go back. We use this one. Now, another scenario that can happen is we can have 2 people here. Let's say this guy here is no longer there, but he's here. They can both be moving in the same direction and start to become closer to each other, yet they're nowhere near God. I actually put here that self-world and club, probably a cult too, because God isn't in the mix. You follow what I'm talking about? So the idea of reconciliation is when we move toward God. And I would say the proper way is you have both people like this and this guy here, if they're both pointing in the same direction. And if this person is moving up this way looking to the cross, this person's going up here looking to the cross, that's when we attain what James is talking about in this text. So I'm making any sense where I'm completely lost. And that's... But anyhow, the idea is that to be reconciled, the humble people will look to the cross. So if we're looking to the cross, we'll be moving in that direction. You follow? And in moving that direction, we will become closer to each other. I should put that the next one. Yeah. And here's a case where these 2 people move closer together, but they're actually farther from God. So the idea of what we want to do is we want to move toward God, look at God, and that is how we have a reconciliation, but it requires humility. And the humility on each of these parties is the ability to look to God. And my question is, do we have any picture in the Bible of a church that's reconciled with God?